Well, good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on this Wednesday for the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition. Today, we are reflecting on the Jubilee of Prisoners. We welcome you to our webinar. As always, we're glad that you have you're going to spend the next hour with us. We appreciate you taking your time to come and join us on today. I am Dr. Kimberly Limore. I am on the steering committee of the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition and a pastoral associate at the Faith Community of St. Sabina in Chicago. As always, we like to start and open with a prayer, and then we'll go on to introduce our webinar for today. I found a webinar, a prayer on the internet. As you know, we can find anything we want on the internet. For the Jubilee of Prisoners. And so I'm just going to pray this prayer, and then we will go on with our webinar. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, good and gracious God, you are the source of all freedom and new beginnings. And through your grace, we are offered release from all that holds us captive. As we gather in this year of Jubilee, we remember the call to mercy, restoration, and justice for all your children. We lift up to you, especially those who are imprisoned. We pray for those who are held in the chains of guilt, despair, and isolation. Shine your light into them so that they may encounter you, Lord, and your boundless mercy. Grant them the courage to seek reconciliation, to embrace repentance, and to allow themselves to be transformed by your love. We pray for all those who work within the justice systems, those officers, chaplains, volunteers, and advocates. May they be empowered to show compassion and fairness in their service, bringing hope and dignity to all those in their care. Guide them, Lord, to see each person as your beloved child, worthy of forgiveness and a fresh start. Lord, in this Jubilee, remind us that true justice is born from love and that your mercy is wider than our understanding. Help us to embrace one another with open hearts, seeing past mistakes to the person you created and loved. May we too be set free from prejudice, indifference, and barriers that divide us. As we celebrate this year of Jubilee, renew in us a spirit of solidarity, reconciliation, and peace. Empower us to work for a world where freedom and dignity are upheld for every person, especially those who are most vulnerable. May we live as people transformed by your mercy, and may we reflect your grace in our actions toward all we meet. We ask this through Christ our Redeemer, who has broken every chain and brought life to the world. Amen. Again, I welcome you to today's program of Leaven of Authentic Hope, reflecting on the Jubilee of Prisoners. In initiating the Jubilee Year last December, Pope Francis called for the witness of believers to be for the world. A leaven of authentic hope, a harbinger of new heavens and a new earth, where men and women will dwell in justice and harmony, in joyful expectation of the fulfillment of the Lord's promises. Today, we are happy and joined and so glad that they gave up of their time on today, Todd Williamson and Felix Rosado, to walk with us as we reflect on the upcoming Jubilee of Prisoners and what it means for us. Just to give you a little background of each of our panelists or speakers for today, Todd Williamson is the director of the Office of Divine Worship of the Archdiocese of Chicago, a position he has held for 25 years. He is an author and teacher on the liturgical and sacramental life of the Church. Felix Rosado is co-founder and executive director of Let's Circle Up, a restorative justice not-for-profit organization, and author of Justice from the Inside Up, a restorative justice education facilitator's manual, Living Justice Press, that was produced in 2024. In 2022, Felix has an awesome story about narrowly escaping death by incarceration via governor clemency after 27 years. While inside, he co-founded the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration, earned a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies at Villanova, and served in leadership with the Alternatives to Violence Project and Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. Today, Felix serves as program manager of Healing Futures, a youth restorative justice diversion program with Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project. Teaches restorative justice at Justice Hill College and Community College of Philadelphia. Felix resides in Southwest Philadelphia and is the proud father of Jubilee, born on the same day he was condemned to die in prison 28 years ago. So if you have any questions as the webinar is happening, please put them in the chat and we will respond to them at the appropriate time. And now I welcome to you Todd Williamson.
Thanks, Dr. Limemore. Greetings. Good to be with everybody today. Felix, I actually want to yield much of my time to you. After that introduction, I want to hear more of your story. I was asked for the participants, I was asked to give some background and to give a little bit of history just in terms of what is the Jubilee Year, why is it significant, what are the special Jubilee celebrations about, where does the Jubilee for Prisoners fit into all this? So I'm kind of just giving the more info, the spirited, lived experience of Felix will be well worth our time, I feel. So let me start in terms of the history of Jubilee and Jubilee years, and to do so, we need to reach back into our deepest history as Christians. In fact, all the way back to our Jewish and our Hebrew forebears. From the book of Leviticus, we hear the first of it. You shall treat this 50th year as sacred. You shall proclaim liberty in the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, a celebration. That's Leviticus chapter 5. So in our history, we have the Hebrew tradition of every 50 years, a jubilee is declared, a year to return to the basics, you could say, a year to return to the basics of our relationship with God, a year to return to the basics of the covenant. And we all know the basics of our relationship with God. We all know the basics of the covenant. They are that God is God and we are not. The basis of Jubilee is that God governs all things. We do not. That God owns all of creation. We do not. That God is all merciful. And we are not always. That God is all forgiving. And we are not always. That God frees. And we often hold bound. That God restores. And we often constrain. That God offers new life, and yet somehow we so often settle for death. Those are the basics that every Jubilee year wants to bring us back to. Later, as Christianity assumed the idea of Jubilee, Christian ideals of reconciliation, of forgiveness, of mercy were added to the observance. Those things that Dr. Limemore prayed for us in that opening prayer. But all of that, right, really is an extension of liberty, God's freeing action. God, whenever he acts, always frees. God always acts to free us from sin, yes, to free us from death, yes, but also to free us from oppression, to free us from marginalization, to free us from incarceration. Specifically, the Christian celebration of Jubilee actually dates up only back, considering the Leviticus history, only dates back to the year 300. That was the first Jubilee year called by Pope Boniface. And he established the Jubilee year to be recognized every 100 years. Well, just 150 years later, Pope Paul II, he changed and established that the Jubilee would be every 25 years, and that's how it remains today. So every 25 years, every quarter of a century, the Church celebrates a year of Jubilee and calls us back to the basics. Often there's a theme that's attached to it, as this year, the Great Jubilee of Hope. Sometimes the Pope calls an extraordinary year of Jubilee, as Pope Francis did in 2015 when he proclaimed the Year of Mercy. But normal cadence for a Jubilee year is every 25 years, and that's the case for the Year of Hope in 2025. During a Jubilee year, Catholics are encouraged to make pilgrimage to specific sites that are designated for the Jubilee year. Pardon my moving computer there. But the church recognizes that, and these sites to which pilgrimage is made are the basilicas of Rome. But the church recognizes that not everybody can get to Rome, and so often the Jubilee allows for dioceses to identify specific churches and shrines within the diocese as holy sites that people are able to visit. That's what happened here in the Archdiocese of Chicago. I believe it's the same in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Numerous parish churches are identified as pilgrimage sites to which the faithful can go to visit, to pray. But even that idea of pilgrimage, I think, is something that is quite significant to the idea of Jubilee. Jubilee calls us on a journey. Every year calls us on a journey. This year calls us to a jubilee of a journey, a pilgrimage of hope, or a pilgrimage to hope. The same is true for this is true literally, as millions will make their way to Rome to visit the pilgrimage sites, but it's also true for locally. Millions of pilgrims will trek this year to sites that are identified in their parishes, as we just said, but also we are all called on a spiritual pilgrimage, all of us, to journey, to walk with, to make pilgrimage to Christ in every aspect of our lives, to walk with Christ, to journey with Christ. So pilgrimage is very key, but also doorways are very key to Jubilee. So in the basilicas of Rome, holy doors have been identified, designated doors in the basilicas through which the faithful can pass in order to observe the Jubilee and receive the graces and indulgences that are attached to it. But again, just like that image of pilgrimage, consider the image of the door, to pass from one space to another, to pass from one place of being to another, to pass from the bondage of sin to forgiveness, to pass from estrangement to community, to pass from isolation to connection with others. And so the doorway is very significant for the pilgrimage of a Jubilee year. In addition, during the Jubilee, Catholics are called to the ideas of service to one another. They're called to mission. They're called to uphold the ideals of healing and hope in the world. In all of this and throughout our history, I think of particular note is John Paul II, who in the year 2000, for the Great Jubilee, established celebrations for various segments of life's population. So, for example, he established a Jubilee celebration for youth. He designated a specific day in Rome to gather and to celebrate youth in the church. Similarly, he established a Jubilee for athletes, for religious, and for politicians. And in all of this, St. John Paul II called for a Jubilee celebration for prisoners, those who are incarcerated. This was unprecedented, had never been done before. He was the first to do it. His purpose, his reasoning for designating a Jubilee celebration for prisoners was to allow those who are incarcerated to enter into the celebrations of the Great Jubilee. He had a message to lawmakers, asking lawmakers to rethink the prison system and the penal system to ensure that there is a more respectful, that they are more respectful of human dignity and that they focus on redemption and community growth. He made gestures of clemency, requesting that prisoners be granted a gesture of clemency for the occasion, which included a call for a potential abolition of the death penalty. And he focused the celebration for prisoners on the idea of redemption. He highlighted the idea that punishment should not be mere retribution, but should aim at the spiritual and the moral redemption of the offender, fostering their return to the community, right? That door passing from estrangement to community. He was the first to visit the Regina Coeli prison in Rome for prayer, emphasizing the presence of Christ in the prisoners. Now, Pope Francis took this a step further for the Holy Year of 2025, the Year of Hope. He made appeals for the release of prisoners and highlighted the need for greater support for the incarcerated. But what makes this Jubilee particularly extraordinary is the unprecedented opening of a holy door in the Rebibbia prison of Rome. He did that on December 26, 2024. The first time in history that a Jubilee Year door was opened within a prison. As this coalition itself states on their website, this revolutionary act signals the church's radical commitment to including those on the margins of society in its most sacred celebrations. And so the church does in this year of hope with our incarcerated brothers and sisters. Indeed, this is a sign of hope. And that's the Jubilee year, right? The year of hope. In fact, Pope Francis began his Bull of Indiction, that's the official document that proclaims a Jubilee year. He began his bull quoting Romans chapter 5. Hope does not disappoint. He says that everyone knows what it is to hope. It's the desire for and the expectation of good things to happen, even though we don't know what the future will bring. Christian hope, he says, is grounded in, and this is unique to us. Christian hope is grounded and it's based in the certainty, the knowledge, the without a doubt certainty that nothing and no one can separate us from God's love. That's Christian hope. That's authentic hope, as we note in the title of this webinar. We all know how desperately the world needs this kind of hope. Those of us on the panel and organizers, we were talking about that before the webinar began. Just how desperately the world needs this kind of hope. Just look at the world today. Look at all that's going on. Listen to the news. Read the headlines. This is such a need, and there is such a need and such a cause for hope. A need for good things to come, for those suffering war, for those who are suffering oppression, for refugees, for those who are marginalized, for those who are imprisoned. The need for hope, the certainty that good things will come, even though we don't know what the future will bring. Authentic hope, right, from the title of the webinar, but also from Pope Francis's proclamation of the Jubilee Year. Authentic hope is that hope that comes from our relationship with Jesus. It comes from our relationship with the Father through Jesus, the beloved of the Father. Authentic hope, I think, is that hope which is rooted in faith that proclaims to the world that the cross never, ever has the last word. That's authentic hope. The cross, in all of its forms, in whatever way it takes shape in my life, in our lives, it never has the last word. And so the cross of war cannot have the last word with Christian hope. The cross of marginalization cannot have the last word with Christian hope. The cross of incarceration, not even that, can have the last word, not with the Christian hope to which the Jubilee Year calls us. And so, to be leaven of authentic hope, as I close my remarks here, to be leaven of authentic hope, I think, means for us to live our lives out of that conviction, out of that utter knowledge, to live out of that beyond a doubt that the cross will never have the last word, not even incarceration. So just a little bit of setting the stage for the Jubilee, for what a Jubilee year is. And Felix, you made a note earlier before we even started when you said there are some pictures you're going to use, and you said the rest of those pictures are just me in Jubilee. And I thought, oh well, what a great way to. He's talking about the Jubilee year. I didn't realize you were talking about your daughter, that is her name. So with that introduction to some of the concepts of Jubilee, I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Lymore.
Thank you, Todd, for that. That was so informative and so uplifting. And like you say, in these times, we do need much hope. So as we move on, I'm going to invite Felix to share more of his story so that we can hear about the Jubilee of Prisoners and what it means to him. Felix?
Leo in the chat just said amen, and I want to second that. Todd, thank you so much for that framing, for bringing us back to the basics, for educating me on all of the elements of the Jubilee year that we're currently in. I really, really appreciate that. My story. Okay, my story begins in the early 70s when my dear abuelita migrated from Puerto Rico to Pennsylvania with her 16 children in search of what she thought was going to be a better life. So we grew up in a very large family. We were tight-knit. We did everything together. But the city we grew up in wasn't a good place to live. Just lots of poverty, lots of violence, lots of drugs. And eventually I got sucked into it and I started to escalate up the crime ladder. It started with shoplifting to breaking into cars to stealing cars to drinking to smoking weed. And at age 14, I made my first drug sale and fell in love with it. Just it gave me the money and power that I didn't have anywhere else in my life. And turns out I was pretty good at it. So I escalated up that ladder pretty quickly. And then with that came a lot of problems. Had to watch my back, had to start carrying guns, eventually using guns. And at age 18, I got arrested for murder and was condemned to spend the rest of my life in prison. Uh, I spent the first 10 years of my incarceration trying to figure out my way in this abnormal environment and also trying to figure out who I was as a person, as a young person. And somewhere around my mid-20s, I had what I like to refer to as a moment of awakening. I realized that the way I was doing things wasn't working and that I had to try something different. And I started getting involved in a bunch of different things in the prison that I didn't even know existed. But I also rediscovered the Catholic faith of my upbringing, which I had walked away from at around age 12. And so I started to get back into the Word. I met with the Catholic chaplain at the prison, confessed, went to Mass that weekend, received communion. This was in 2006. And so that springboarded me into this life of service and purpose that I still have not looked back from till this day. I spent the next bunch of years uh, getting a college degree, starting a bunch of programs in the prison myself, and fighting for my freedom in all different kind of ways through the courts. I was part of an effort to get some legislation passed so that people with my sentence could have relief. And then the door cracked open ever so slightly to a very rare form of release for people with death by incarceration sentences called commutation. So the governors of every state have the power to shorten sentences of people in the state prison sentence. For over 2 decades, the door on that process was completely shut because of something that happened a year prior to my arrest. The next few governors didn't want to touch it until this one came along, uh, granted a couple people commutation. I decided to apply. Uh, Most of the people who were getting it were over 65, had over 35 years in, were the non-shooter in a second-degree felony murder case, and that quickly became the unwritten standard for who was going to get it. I didn't fit any of those categories by far. So I knew it was a long shot, but I decided to file an application. A few years later, it started going through the process, and eventually, to shorten the story, I did come in front of a group called the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. I got interviewed by them and ultimately got denied. And so that was devastating. My family was crushed, but I decided to file for something called reconsideration, and that too was denied. So now we're in 2021. In 2022, I filed a second reconsideration request. That one actually went through. I got granted another hearing in front of this board. I got interviewed by them again. And this time, when it was their turn to vote, they voted to recommend me to the governor. And 3 months later, on July 14th of 2022, the governor commuted my sentence, and 4 days after that, I walked out of prison a free person for the first time since I was 18 at age 45, and dove headfirst into this amazing life I now have. I am a program manager of a youth restorative justice diversion program here in Philadelphia. And here are some images of my first moments of freedom with my mother, who also did every second of that time with me. The part of the story that hardly gets talked about is the impact of incarceration on families. So this is the day she too became free. And so in addition to managing this restorative justice program, I adjunct at two different colleges here in Philadelphia. And also I am a homeowner, a husband, and a first-time dad of a beautiful 14-month-old named Jubilee, to go back to Todd's comment earlier. We were sitting on the couch, thinking of names, and we narrowed it down to two. And so Jubilee was one of them. And this was actually my wife's idea. She came up with the name. She's not Catholic, knows nothing about Jubilee Year or anything like that. And the other one was Esperanza, which is hope in Spanish. And so as we're debating on which one has more syllables, which one sounds better, which one flows off the tongue nicer, we had this random Spotify playlist on in the background called Chill Vibes, that I just picked out of nowhere. And this song titled Jubilee just came on, uh, by a black husband and wife folk duet, called War and Treaty. And I had never heard of them at all. But I started listening to the song and I said, hold on, what are they saying? And we checked out the chorus, and they're singing Jubilee, and the song really fit. We started to listen to the lyrics, and we actually played it back again a couple times, and we were like, this is it. So anyway, the conversation was over. That was her name. And she just brings us so much joy. This was on her 1 week birthday, which was my 2 year freedom anniversary. And in the background is the t-shirt I wore to walk out of prison, which I have framed in my house right now. It says, "Till we're all free." I was really thinking hard about what message I wanted to say, uh, as I knew cameras and everything were going to be on me. And I just wanted to make it clear that, I'm not free until everyone's free. There's still a lot of people I left behind who are equally deserving, if not more, of the miracle that I was gifted with. So yeah, she's been very, I mean, she's, it's something I've always desired, to be a dad. And it's something that the state prohibited me from experiencing for over a quarter of a century. So now I get to experience that kind of love. And that's us in the homeland in Puerto Rico. Uh, Back to the roots. We try to go there at least once or twice a year. Uh, yeah, I mean, I'll actually stop there, you know, because I'm looking forward to just speaking with all of you and hearing questions and comments and everything else. But that's in a snapshot my life, basically.
Thank you, Felix. She's beautiful,
Mhm.
absolutely beautiful. So when you were talking, all I could hear is the grace of God and
Absolutely.
how the grace of God um, entered into your life. Even when you really weren't quite seeking it, but you had started, but you're thinking that, no, everybody else is going to go ahead. Can you talk about, though, how that has transformed you and your work as you are working with, restorative justice to juveniles?
Mm. Yeah, it makes all the difference. What's known as a cradle Catholic. I I did the sacraments. I went to church on Sundays with my family, but I never really internalized any of it. Was just kind of going through the motions. And so when I started getting sucked into the streets, it was really dark and hopeless, and made me lose faith in God existing at all, because of what I was seeing around me, and what I was participating in. And so anyway, all these years later, I decided that I needed to get serious about a relationship with God, and there was no question about where I was going to go.
Mhm.
I I sent a note to the to to the Catholic chaplain immediately asking for a meeting. And, like I said, after we talked, I went to mass that weekend. I haven't missed one since. It's been however many years. We're talking about 2006. Wherever I am, even here at home, I could be in another state. If it's Sunday, I
Mhm.
I check online where the closest church is, and I go, because that grounds me.
Mhm.
That gives me the food I need, right, to be nourished, and to to be able to give to others. And really, it's what gave me hope, because prison is probably the epitome of hopelessness.
Mhm.
You know, by design, it's meant to crush your hope. Its architecture, the rules, the oppression felt by those who work there onto us, like all of it, the dehumanization. And so it takes a Herculean effort to muster hope in that kind of context. And as one of my favorite abolitionists, Mariam Kaba likes to say, hope is a discipline. It's something that you have to create and build and work for every single day. It's not something that could be taken for granted at all. So I had to figure out how to stay hopeful in that environment with a sentence that had no end to it. And watching my peers grow old and die around me every day, and figuring out how to make sure that that would not be my fate. Uh, so I found purpose, and that was the game changer. That is what helped me generate hope, because it's hard to do on your own. And it's so fragile, especially in prison. Too much of it will hurt you, and too little of it can kill you. I s- saw several of my dear brothers take their own lives because of a lack of hopelessness. So there's this balance that you have to do when it comes to hope. And anyway, none of it could be possible on my own or with sheer will. Uh, it's all God. And I keep my eyes on that. And regardless of what was going on, I just had to believe that there was something better, that there was going to be an end to this at some point. I always envisioned what my freedom was going to look like, and my mother instilled that in me. At
Mm,
the end of every phone call, letter, and visit, she would tell me to envision my freedom, to see it, to lay down in that bed every night and imagine what I'm going to do when I come home, what my days are going to look like. And I used to do that. And honestly, y'all, my life looks a lot like what I used to imagine. I didn't have all the nuance, but it's
mm,
pretty close. And so I thank God for that every day.
mm,
And, my purpose remains the same, to help as many people as possible from making the same mistakes I made.
mm,
But it has increased now to include bringing home those I left behind. That's a big part of my world now,
mm,
is to talk to whoever I can as often as I can, to share my story, to put a face on this issue. This is what someone who is condemned to die in prison looks like. Not these images we might have in our heads of monsters and strange people. And, this is it. And my mentors, my teachers, the people who set me on a path that ultimately led to my freedom are still in there fighting to get out. And
mm.
so I'm doing everything I can to help young people from going in there in the first place, and to bring home those who are currently in there.
So, can you offer some steps? Because I know most of the people on here that are listening on the webinar are working in prison ministry in some way, shape, or form. And can you give them any kind of advice or steps, things
Mm,
to offer hope to those that they encounter?
yeah.
I know you had some people that mentored you and offered you
Mhm,
hope.
mhm.
Is there some words of encouragement you can give them to offer those that they encounter?
Yeah. I mean, this is gospel work, you know? Uh, in Jesus's first act of public ministry, he stood up in the synagogue, he unrolled the scroll, he read from Isaiah. He said, I came here to bring glad tidings to the poor, to proclaim liberty to captives, to give sight to the blind, to, to free the oppressed. This is what he chose to prioritize, right? In his first words of public ministry. And we've really lost sight of that in so many ways. Practicing faith has become all these other things. But to bring it back to the basics, as Todd tried to get us to do earlier, I mean, this is essentially what it's about. And so when we walk into prisons, when we go into these places that we're not meant to be in. I mean, let's be clear. Those walls and fences aren't only there to keep people in, but to keep people out. So we're uh we're engaging in an act of defiance every time we send a letter in, accept a phone call, visit someone. We're we're being Matthew 25 Catholics, right? What you did to the least of these, you did to me. And so I would encourage everyone to continue to do that in small ways, in large ways. So many people on the outside were a lifeline to me when I was inside. The volunteers who used to come in for the prison ministry, to help with the different programs I was a part of, the professors who taught my college courses. I built relationships with all of them. And I mean, their letters of support helped me come home when it came time to go in front of the board of pardons, so show up. I mean, it's really simple. Just be present, be wholehearted, be authentic, listen, and if there is an opportunity to do something more concrete, uh, do that as well.
Can you, I just want to remind people you can put any questions in the chat. So please feel free to do that. Can you tell us more about your program, your restorative justice diversion program with the youth?
Mhm.
Can you give us a little more background on what that entails?
Yeah. There's there's two different things in my bio that you mentioned. One is Let's Circle Up, the restorative justice organization I co-founded while inside with another brother who's fighting a death by incarceration sentence. He's currently in year 43 of his, and who we're trying to bring home right now. But that's the program I'm currently trying to build up out here. Uh, and so we're going to continue to do restorative justice education as we have been for all these years, but we look to add a few additional programs to it, young adult diversion and also restorative reentry. So we're going to be using restorative justice processes uh, to divert young adults from the system and also to help people transition from prison to the community. So currently hard at work, trying to build that up so that I can transition from my current job to full-time there. My current job is as manager of Healing Futures, a youth restorative justice diversion program. We work with young people ages 12 to 17. We get our referrals from the district attorney's office of young people in that age range who have been arrested for a variety of different things. And we guide them through our process, which involves meeting with the people they harmed and working out what needs to happen to put things more right. And then at the end of it, their charges get dismissed and they can go on with their lives. So I was in their shoes. I did everything that there is to do in the juvenile punishment system. I was on house arrest. I did community service. I had fines. I did diversion. I did time in detention centers and placements, and all of it made me worse. So I get to talk to them from firsthand experience about, what what their lives could look like if they continue on that path, but also what their lives could look like if they try something different.
When you speak about freedom, being free, um, your spirituality, even though, you were physically confined, how did you overcome that feeling of confinement, but you knew your spirit was free?
Yeah. And listen, to be clear, we're not just talking about one dimension of freedom here. Freedom has a few. And so when I was a boy, I could say that I was free mentally and spiritually and emotionally and physically. And at some point, I lost my mental and spiritual freedom while free in the outside world. And then I lost my physical freedom and didn't have any freedom for a while. And at some point during my incarceration, I was able to get free mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And I did the last uh 18 years of my incarceration uh, a free person, I would say. I had joy, I had purpose. I woke up every morning with something to do, something important to do. I slept well at night. And then when I got released, I now have it all. And this is what I want for everyone. This is what God wants for everyone. This is God's intention for us. And we merely need to cooperate with his will and his grace, you know? And so how I was able to find that mental and spiritual freedom inside was through him, of course, and also through finding my purpose. So the advice I now give to others is find your purpose. Everyone has something unique about them that no one else on the planet has, that God put them here to be able to express. And the only way we find out what that is by trying things, by taking chances, by doing stuff that might be uncomfortable at first. But in those attempts, at some point, it's going to be clear that this is it. And that's that thing that gives you joy. And I'm not talking about the kind of joy that the world offers. It's a completely different kind of joy
Right.
that doesn't go away depending
Mm-hmm.
on what's happening or what the circumstances around you are. And so that's the goal. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want for all my people.
They say a joy that you didn't get through human means, but a joy that God cannot, no one can take it away from you. So
Amen.
we like that. Um, Todd, would you mind
Yes.
sharing as you listen to Felix's story? How do you hear that the call of the church in the Jubilee year and always as we going forth?
Oh my goodness. Felix, your story is Jubilee. The call to all of us, um, not just to accept God's freeing of us in all those ways that Felix talked about, but to take that to others. And that's Felix. What is you? Yeah, you made a reference to Matthew 25. That's what Jubilee years call us to, um, and call us to remember, um, and call us to do unto others. Right?
Mhm.
Um, Felix, it strikes me. When you were talking, it's like. Um, Once you encounter freedom,
Mm,
true freedom, right? And you even said you were free and yeah, you did have true freedom. But once you encounter that, you can't help but share that with others and desire their freedom. Um, Most definitely from incarceration, but also, freedom from um, all those other prisons you talked about before even being imprisoned. And the way I talked about it at the beginning was like the crosses, right? Um, to un to unbind others.
mm.
So I'm just listening to your story, and it's a perfect example for talking about Jubilee in the church.
Exactly. It's wonderful. Terry mentioned that he's a chaplain for 15 years, and whenever he hears about a former incarcerated individual is living such a life as you are, Felix, he likes to bring those stories back to the prison, that they know that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Hmm.
So he likes to share stories like that. And I was thinking, do you go on YouTube or TikTok to share your testimony? Because it's definitely an awesome testimony.
Mm.
So that would be kind of something to look for. The young people are more on TikTok and YouTube and all those other kind of social media platforms. Think about doing that. So Deacon Ray is asking, do you go to prisons to speak with the incarcerated or to local chaplains on retreats or parish retreats?
I've been back in a prison once, and that was recently. It was earlier this year, so it did take me a while. It wasn't something I was even looking forward to, but I got invited and I couldn't say no. But it was to be part of a panel, uh, speaking to like a bunch of legislators and policymakers, and there was this event. But I still remember as we were approaching the prison and the ETA on the GPS was like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm like, damn, I started to feel this clenching of my stomach and my body. And once we pulled up in the parking lot, I was able to see guys exercising in the yard, the fences, and like I started to think about them, and I started to remember what that was like for me. And once I went in, and uh, like three guys just immediately came up to me to greet me and to tell me that they've been like following my life on the outside and how inspired they are, and how like since I was the youngest person to receive clemency, how that has given them hope. And uh, like all of the the feelings just went away, and like I felt happy to be there, because I know what it's like to have someone from the outside come in when I was in there, and how that would lift me and give me hope, and give me that connection to the outside world that prison tries everything it can to strip from you. So yeah, I came in. It wasn't to do any ministry, but I guess I was, right. I was sharing. It wasn't in a chapel setting, but I was during lunch. I made sure I went around and talked to every single person who had a brown uniform. The guys who were serving the food, the guys who were recording the event, the guys who were taking the pictures, the people who were actually part of the like. I went around to each of them, and I had like a little 5-minute conversation with them, and just made sure that they knew that anything's possible. It could happen. But I mean, I think it's something I want to do more of, at some point. But with like 3 different jobs, trying to start an organization, dad, husband, homeowner, it's just hard. Prisons are far away. They're intentionally that way. They're meant to separate families and destroy communities. But yeah, I I do hope to get into that a little more at some point.
Well, one thing I like and I really love about you, Felix, is your unashamedly sharing your faith.
Mm.
A lot of times we call Catholics undercover Christians because a lot of times you don't want to talk about it for whatever reason, but you are out there verbalizing it, making it real, showing people that you are a witness of and you are a disciple of Jesus Christ. And that is the best Bible that anybody could read is your life. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that with us on today.
Well, Saint Francis once said that, well, he encouraged us to preach the gospel daily, and if necessary, use words. And
Exactly.
that's always been my approach.
Mhm.
I don't walk like I don't have a big cross around my neck. I'm not, walking around telling people what they should believe and not believe. I share my story, hope that people draw their own conclusions from it. And if someone does ask me about my faith, I'm more than happy to talk about
Definitely.
That's authentic hope, Felix,
it.
right? That's authentic hope. That the very title of this, coming from Pope Francis, that is authentic Christian hope.
Mm.
Exactly. Someone wrote the Gospel of Felix. So we thank you both on today for sharing with us. Felix, your story, amazing. Todd, your faith and your sharing of what Jubilee is and the Old Testament, New Testament, just bringing it all together. We love it. We thank you for doing that on today and sharing with us.